400 of the Cascade Pack's finest stood frozen as Alpha Cullen Blackwood lifted the microphone. His palm pressed warm against the silk of my emerald gown. That deep, iron-laced voice rolled through the ballroom, but before my name left his lips, the grand oak doors exploded inward. A crack like splitting bone. Arctic wind surged through the gap, carrying a scent that made Cullen tear his hand from my waist as if my skin had burned him. Rain, desperation, and something older, something buried. A woman stood in the doorway, soaked to the marrow by the storm outside. This is the story of how betrayal lit the fuse of a war. The champagne in Serafina's glass had gone warm long ago. She gripped it anyway, a lifeline disguised as crystal. The Blackwood estate thrummed that evening, a towering modern fortress of dark stone and glass, clinging to the edge of the Washington wilderness like a predator surveying its territory. $40 million of architecture, all of it belonging to Cullen Blackwood. To the outside world, he was a corporate titan, CEO of Obsidian Systems. But inside these walls, among senators, billionaires, and the elite who bore the mark, he was something else entirely. Alpha of the Cascade Pack. And tonight was meant to be one thing only: his public claim of engagement. Serafina smoothed the emerald fabric at her hip. Nothing about her pedigree justified standing on that stage. She was a scholarship student, a graphic designer who'd stumbled into Cullen's orbit at a Seattle coffee shop 3 years ago. The pull between them had been immediate, violent in its certainty. The mate bond, biological, absolute, unbreakable. At least, that's what she'd believed. "You look uneasy," a low voice said behind her. Cullen's hand found the small of her back. Heat radiated through the silk like a brand. He smelled of cedar, rain, and that dark spice that made her wolf rise to the surface. 6'3", eyes like a storm rolling over slate, a jaw carved sharp enough to split glass. Sarah leaned into his chest, forcing a smile. He pressed his lips to her temple. She whispered, their private vow, spoken only between them. The music dimmed. The room went still. Cullen moved to the front, microphone in hand. Every inch the apex predator wrapped in a bespoke Tom Ford suit. His voice filled the silence, steady and rich as dark water. The grand oak doors at the far end of the ballroom blew open with the force of a gunshot. Every head turned. The silence that followed was suffocating. The woman stood in the threshold, battered by the downpour behind her, small-framed, platinum blonde hair plastered to her skull, a face drained pale with anguish. But none of that held the room. What held the room, what stopped 400 hearts cold, were her hands, pressed to a swollen belly, 6 months along at least. Serafina's chest locked. She knew that face. Every soul in that ballroom knew it. Isla Vane, Cullen's childhood sweetheart. The woman who had vanished from the pack 2 full years before Sarah ever arrived. The one Cullen swore he'd left behind. "Cullen!" Isela's voice broke, a ragged sob ricocheting off the vaulted ceiling. She stumbled forward 1 step. Cullen released the microphone. It hit the stage floor with a shriek of feedback that made the crowd flinch. He didn't notice. He was already moving, not walking, running. "Isa!" He caught her the instant her knees buckled, swept her up against his chest, his tailored suit soaking through with the rain that clung to her body. Serafina stood alone on the stage. The color had drained from her face like water through sand. He never looked back, not once, not at me. "The baby!" Isa gasped, loud enough for the front rows to hear every syllable. Her fingers twisted into Cullen's lapels. __, quote _14____. The whisper tore through the room like flame through dry grass. An heir. In wolf society, An alpha with an heir didn't just hold power, he held the future. A mate mattered, but an heir meant survival. Sarafina descended from the stage on shaking legs. She moved toward them, silently begging Kalin to deny it, to look at her and say the word, impossible. Kalin, she breathed, barely a sound. He looked up. His grey eyes were blown wide, shock and something deeper, something primal and protective that crawled down her spine like ice. His gaze dropped to Isela's stomach, then lifted to Sarah, held there. Seconds stretched into something unbearable. He said, voice like iron. She blinked. The alpha command in his roar made every guest in the hall flinch. Postponed. Isela pressed her face into Kalin's neck, whimpering softly. But over his shoulder, Sarah saw it. A flash. Isela's wet, glistening eyes locked onto hers, and the corner of her mouth curled. A tiny, poisonous smirk. Something shattered inside Sarah's chest, not just her heart, the bond itself. She felt a tear, physical, real, a severing that left her gasping. You're choosing her? Sarah's voice came out steady, dangerously so. __quote _23 __. Anguish cracked across his face, real pain. Then Isela cried out, hands clutching her stomach. Kalin snapped. He turned his back, carried the pregnant woman out of the hall with his security detail flanking them like a wall. He left Sarafina standing alone, center of the room, 400 witnesses to her destruction. She didn't cry. Not yet. She placed her champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray with careful, deliberate hands. __quote _26 __. She whispered to no one. The master bedroom reeked of him, his scent everywhere. Torture. Sarafina moved with surgical precision. She didn't grab blindly. She ignored the dresses he'd bought her, the jewelry, the furs. She pulled a duffel bag from the closet, packed only what she'd arrived with 3 years ago. Jeans, graphic tees, her sketchbook, her laptop. Her passport. Then she opened the safe. Inside, cash. $15,000 saved methodically from her freelance design work. Kalin used to laugh about her escape fund, called it charming, told her she'd never need it. She packed every dollar. The door groaned open behind her. Kalin stood in the frame, wrecked, tie gone, shirt unbuttoned. He smelled of antiseptic and Isela's floral perfume. Sarafina. A heavy exhale. He stepped toward her. Thank God you're here. I thought, wait, what are you doing? What does it look like? Sarah yanked the zipper shut. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. You're not leaving. He almost laughed, shook his head like the idea was absurd. Stop the theatrics. Isela is in the infirmary. Dr. Morris confirmed the pregnancy. She's fragile. Sarafina, she's been running from rogue wolves. Is the child yours? Sarah kept her eyes on the floor, hunting for her boots. Refusing to look at him. The timeline fits, Kalin said, dragging a hand through his hair. Before we met, listen, we'll run a DNA test after the birth. But until then, I can't risk a potential heir's life. You understand that, don't you? You've always been rational. Rational? Sarah lifted her gaze. Her eyes were bone dry and burning with a cold fire Kalin had never seen before. You humiliated me in front of the entire council. You suspended our union for her. I did what the pack required, Kalin snarled, his palm cracking against the wall. She's carrying my child. What kind of alpha abandons that? You could have sheltered her without destroying us, Sarah said quietly. But you didn't. You panicked. You chose your past over your future. She crossed to the dresser, picked up the ring, 5 carats, rare blue diamond. Held it out. Take it. Colleen stepped back like she'd drawn a weapon. Quote 43. Quote 44. Sarah said, her voice shaking now. Quote 45. She set the ring on the dresser, a quiet clink against wood. Those words landed like a detonation. The air thickened, pressing against the walls. Colleen dropped to his knees, hands clawing at his chest, choking as a bond began to shred itself apart. The sensation mimicked a cardiac arrest, raw, crushing, absolute. Quote 47. He rasped, his irises bleeding to black. Sarah stepped past him. She felt it too, a hollow ache carving through her spirit. But survival instinct buried the pain beneath adrenaline. She walked through the door. Colleen tried to chase her, dragging himself towards a hallway, but the agony of the severing bond flattened him against the hardwood. He roared. Fury tangled with raw terror. Quote 52 __. Sarah stopped at the top of the staircase. She looked back at the man she had loved more than her own heartbeat. Quote 53, she said. She took the stairs down, pushed through the front door, and climbed into her battered Honda Civic. She did not head for the airport. Kaylin would comb through flight records. She did not run to her parents. They were gone. She drove east, toward Idaho, toward the one person Kaylin never knew existed. The moment she crossed the Pack's territorial line, she felt the last filament of their bond snap clean. Rogue, stateless, unprotected. And for the first time in 3 years, free. 3 months later, the Chicago penthouse overlooked the frozen gray sweep of Lake Michigan. Cold space, sterile surfaces, safe walls. Sarafina stood at the window, herbal tea warming her palms. Her hair was different now, chopped into a sharp bob, dyed deep chestnut. She went by Sarah Miller. "You need to eat more," a voice called from the kitchen. Adrian Hale stepped into the room. He was no werewolf. He was something far more dangerous in the modern world. A human forensic accountant who knew where the bodies were buried. He was also Sarah's cousin on her mother's side, a connection she had kept hidden from every wolf who ever knew her name. "I am not hungry," Sarah murmured. "You need fuel, especially if you plan to launch this business." In 90 days, Sarah had not crumbled. She had forged her rage into something sharp and purposeful, combining Adrian's underworld contacts with her own design talent. She had built a niche branding agency, one that served establishments catering to night crawlers, vampire lounges, neutral territory hotels. She was constructing a web, thread by deliberate thread. Sarah asked, settling into a chair. Adrian paused. He pulled out a tablet. Sarah's pulse stuttered. "Why?" "Kaylin is unraveling," Adrian said flatly. "Since you left, he has turned brutal, picking fights with neighboring alphas over phantom border violations, tearing through the entire state hunting for you. And Isella? This is where it gets interesting." He tapped the screen. "She lives in the main house now, playing Luna. But there are rumors." "What rumors?" "The baby still has not come. She insists it is a wolf pregnancy, longer gestation. But my sources say Kaylin will not go near her. He sleeps in his office. He has agents combing every major city." Satisfaction bloomed hot in Sarah's chest. Then dread chased it down. Adrian gave a steady nod. Sarah went still. Adrian slid a grainy photograph across the table. The photograph showed Isella in some shadowy venue, laughing freely. Her fingers curled around the forearm of a man marked by a thick scar cutting across his throat. Sarah's breath caught.
She knew that scar.
That's Silas, Alpha of the Iron River Pack, Kaylin's sworn enemy. Adrian gave a solemn nod. __quote _68 __. Sarah stood so fast her chair shrieked across the floor. Adrian asked quietly. Sarah drifted back to the window, staring into the bruised grey sky. She thought of Kaylin's eyes, those stormy irises that once softened only for her, before madness swallowed him whole. She remembered the bond, cracked and bleeding, but still there. Because, Sarah murmured, her palm pressing flat against her own stomach.
She wasn't carrying his child,
But she felt the ghost of every future they'd been promised. Because Kaylin is a fool who broke me in half. But he isn't evil. And the Cascade Pack, those are innocent families, children I used to teach. She turned to face Adrian, and something cold settled behind her eyes. I need to send word, not to Kaylin, to the council. That's dangerous, Adrian warned. I know. Sarah's mouth curved, a sharp, wolfish smirk she'd picked up from years among predators. But I'm not just a designer anymore, Adrian. I'm the woman who walked away from the Alpha of Cascade and lived to tell it. That buys me a certain kind of currency. What exactly are you planning? I'm going to crash the Winter Solstice Gala, Sarah declared. Neutral ground. Every Alpha will be there. Carlin included. Silas too. You're suggesting you walk into a room with two Alphas who either want to claim you or kill you? No. Sarah pulled a garment bag from the closet. I won't be walking in as Sarafina, the rejected mate. I'll be walking in as your fiancée. And together, we take Isella's entire lie apart. The Grand Hotel in Denver stood as neutral territory for the American wolf packs. By ancient covenant, no blood could be spilled on its marble floors. Tonight, the Winter Solstice Gala had turned the ballroom into a theater of velvet, diamonds, and killers dressed in courtesy. Kaylin Blackwood leaned against the bar, gripping a bourbon he couldn't taste. He looked like a ghost attending his own funeral. 20 pounds gone in 3 months. His cheekbones jutted like blades beneath the skin, his eyes were raw-rimmed, and those once fierce grey irises had gone flat, the stillness of a man who had stopped fighting death. __quote _83 __. Isella whispered, threading her arm through his. 7 months pregnant now, belly high and tight. She wore pink, soft, deliberate, broadcasting innocence and vulnerability. Kaylin recoiled from her touch. Quote 84, quote 85, she hissed, her gaze sweeping the room. Kaylin bit out through clenched teeth. Isella whimpered, summoning tears. A tactic that once worked flawlessly. Now it only drove his wolf deeper into a frenzy, pacing behind his ribs, howling for Sarah. Then the entire ballroom tilted. Not a sound. A scent. Vanilla, jasmine, and cold steel. The double doors swept wide. Carlin's glass exploded in his fist. Shards bit into his palm. Blood ran between his fingers, dripped onto marble. He didn't feel it. Sarafina stood at the top of the staircase. She bore no resemblance to the girl who had fled in a Honda Civic. A gown of liquid silver poured over every line of her body, the back cut daringly open. Her lips were stained deep crimson, but it was her presence that gutted him. She didn't carry the scent of a shattered mate. She radiated authority. And she wasn't alone. Her hand rested in the crook of a man's arm, human, tall, golden-haired, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars. He leaned close, murmuring something meant only for her, and Serafina laughed. A real laugh, rich and throaty, the kind Kaylin hadn't heard in years. Who is that? Isella's voice pitched high, almost shrill. Kaelin breathed. Her name sat on his tongue like prayer and poison at once. He was already moving. Instinct drove him forward, shouldering past a southern alpha, ignoring the growl of protest. He needed proximity, needed contact, needed proof she was real. He reached the foot of the staircase just as Sarah and her companion descended. Kaelin stepped into their path. His broad frame threw a shadow across them both. __quote _92 ___. His voice came out raw, broken. She stopped. Her gaze traveled over him, slow, clinical.
Utterly detached. Not hatred. Something far worse. Indifference. She said with polished courtesy. Kaelin looked down at his dripping hand, then back at her. His stare locked onto Adrian. His alpha aura surged outward, a crushing wave of dominance meant to buckle a human's knees. Adrien didn't flinch. He adjusted his spectacles, offered a measured smile. Fiancé. The word hit Kaelin like a fist to the sternum. His vision tunneled. A growl, low, primal, dangerous, rolled from deep in his chest. Everyone nearby heard it. The music died. The room went deathly still. Kaelin roared, composure fracturing. Sarah said, her voice cut through the silence like a blade drawn clean. She stepped closer, into his space, fearless. Kaelin snarled, grabbing her wrist. The voice was deep, guttural. It rose from the crowd like something dragged from the earth. Kaelin went rigid. He knew that voice. Silas, Alpha of Iron River, materialized from the shadows, massive, scarred, ugly in every way that mattered. He held a glass of red wine and wore a smile that promised nothing good. Kaelin dropped Sarah's wrist, pivoting his fury toward his rival. Keep her name out of your mouth. Silas? Why? Silas shrugged, his eyes drifting to Isella, who had gone pale and small behind Kaelin. We're all family here, aren't we? Isn't that right, Isella? Every trace of color drained from Isella's face. Sarah watched the exchange. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped back, pulling Adrian with her. This was the moment. The trap sprung. __quote _110 __. Sarah declared, her voice carrying across the room. She spoke to Adrian, but her gaze pinned Isella in place. She turned and walked away. She felt Kaelin's stare burning her spine, felt Silas tracking Isella, and she knew Isella, panicked and cornered, would move. 20 minutes later, the winter air bit at exposed skin. Sarah didn't feel it. She pressed herself into the shadow of a stone pillar, phone raised and recording. She'd predicted this. Silas's appearance had shaken Isella to her marrow. The woman needed reassurance, or she needed to beg him for silence. The terrace door groaned open. Isella rushed out, trembling in her sheer dress. Her eyes darted frantically before she spotted the figure at the railing, cigar glowing between thick fingers. Isella hissed, clutching his arm. Sarah's camera tightened on them. Silas laughed, a low, ugly sound. Smoke curled from his lips into the frozen air. He grabbed Isella's face, fingers pressing hard into her jaw. Quote 114, quote 115. Isella whispered, voice cracking. Quote 116, quote 117, Silas said, mouth curling with contempt. Quote 118, quote 119. Silas shoved her back. Quote 120, Isella whimpered. Quote 121, quote 122, Silas said flatly. Quote 123. Sarah stopped the recording. Her heart hammered so hard it bruised her ribs from the inside. She had it. Treason, infidelity, conspiracy to wage war. all captured. She pivoted to leave, to find Kalin, and walked straight into a wall of muscle. Quote 124. One of Silas's enforcers, massive, shaved skull. His hand closed around her throat before she could draw breath. Caught the little spy, the enforcer growled, hauling her out of the darkness. Silas turned. His eyes flared wide, then narrowed into something predatory. A slow, vicious grin split his face. Well, well, Serafina, he purred. You just made everything significantly harder for yourself. Let me go, Sarah rasped, fingers clawing at the grip crushing her windpipe. No. Silas laughed, low, amused, and slid a silver dagger from inside his jacket. Plan B. We kill the mate. Kalin drowns in grief. We take the pack, tonight. The dagger rose. Boom! The terrace doors exploded inward. Kalin didn't look human anymore. He was mid-shift, eyes blazing neon gold, teeth stretching into fangs. He'd followed Sarah's scent. He could smell her terror. __quote _131 __. Kalin hurled himself across the terrace and hit the enforcer holding Sarah like a freight train. One fluid motion. The man's throat, gone. Blood painted Sarah's silver gown in a hot arc. She dropped to the ground, choking for air. Silas snarled, erupting into his massive grey wolf. He threw himself at Kalin. Two alphas slammed together, a savage hurricane of fur, claws, and fangs. Guests inside the ballroom screamed as the fight crashed through the shattered doors. Chaos. Immediate. Total. Silas's operatives, disguised as waitstaff, pulled weapons. Kalin's security met them head-on. The gala became a battlefield. Sarah scrambled back, fighting to get her legs beneath her. Through the mayhem, she spotted Isella, slipping towards the exit. Not tonight. Sarah clenched her jaw, snatched a heavy ice bucket off the nearest table, and launched it. The metal caught Isella behind the knees. The pregnant woman crumpled with a sharp cry. But the real war raged at the room's center. Kalin fought with terrifying savagery, shredding Silas apart. Yet something was wrong. He wasn't guarding himself at all. Sarah screamed. Silas had shifted back to human form. In his hand, a desert eagle, silver rounds. He aimed the barrel not at Kalin, at Sarah. Silas bellowed, blood frothing between his teeth. He squeezed the trigger. Time stretched like taffy. Sarah watched the muzzle flash bloom white-hot. Her body refused to move. Kalin's didn't. He didn't go for Silas. He threw his own body between the bullet and Sarah. The round punched into his chest with a wet, sickening impact. He staggered backward, straight into her arms. No! The scream tore from Sarah's throat, raw and ragged. Kalin buckled. The light in his eyes guttered instantly. Silver poison flooded his veins, turning the lines along his neck coal black. Silas cackled, lifting the gun for a kill shot. __quote _136 __. A throwing knife buried itself in his shoulder before he could fire. Adrian stood framed in the doorway, terrified, shaking, gripping a second blade. That heartbeat of distraction was enough. Marcus, Kalin's beta, drove Silas to the floor. Cascade security swarmed the Iron River assassins. Silas, bleeding, outnumbered, smashed through a window and vanished into the night. He left Isella behind. He left his men behind. Sarah noticed none of it. She was on her knees, both palms pressed hard against the hole in Kalin's chest. The blood ran dark, far too dark. She ordered. Tears carved hot trails down her face. Kalin coughed. Blood slicked his lips. One trembling hand lifted, barely, and found her cheek. He whispered. The words gurgled in his throat. Sarah sobbed. Kalin managed, the ghost of a smile. His hand fell. His eyes rolled white. Quote 145 _. Sarah shook him, screaming. Quote 146. The medical wing of the Cascade estate was suffocatingly silent. 3 days of nothing but the sterile pulse of a heart monitor and freezing rain hammering reinforced glass. For 3 days, Serafina had hovered somewhere between waking and collapse. No real sleep, no real food. She sat rigid in that unforgiving vinyl chair, eyes locked on the slow rise and fall of Kalin's chest. The bullet had carried a concentrated military-grade toxin, engineered to devour a shifter from the inside out. Black veins crawled in a dark web across his neck, mapping the poison's path through him. Only the raw, stubborn force of his alpha bloodline kept his heart beating. That, and maybe his sheer refusal to die while she sat beside him. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. Pale grey light crept through the window. Then the monitor spiked, sharp, rapid, not panic, but raw adrenaline surging through flat-lined veins. Sarah jolted from a shallow doze. __quote _147 __. He didn't groan, didn't flutter his eyelids. He gasped, a violent, drowning man's breath, and launched upright. The IV stand rattled, nearly toppling. His eyes snapped wide, grey irises swallowed by a glowing nuclear yellow. He didn't look like a man waking from a coma. He looked like a weapon someone had just armed. Sarah was on her feet, hands hovering. He ripped the IVs free with a savage jerk. Blood spattered the white sheets. He didn't look at it. He swung his legs over the edge, bare feet striking cold tile. He swayed hard, skin the color of ash, sweat rolling down his temples, but the energy pouring off him was something primal. Pure, undiluted rage. Where is he? His voice was a ruin, low, grinding, like stone dragging against stone. Sarah stepped directly into his path, pressing both palms flat against his burning chest. You are in no condition to move. I don't care about doctors, Kalin snarled, his gaze cutting past her to the door. Where is Silas? Gone. She kept her voice steady, willing his wolf to hear her calm. He retreated to Iron River. The council set a perimeter. They're negotiating a ceasefire. Negotiate? Kalin laughed, a dark, wet sound that carved ice down Sarah's spine. __quote _157 __. He snatched a clean shirt from the chair where she'd left it. His hands trembled as he pulled it on, buttoning it over the bandages. The fabric caught against healing tissue, and he winced. But he didn't stop. Sarah gripped his arm, her voice cracking. He went still. He looked at her hand on his arm, then up at her face. The ferro glow dimmed just enough for Sarah to glimpse the man hiding beneath the monster. He lifted his hand, cupping her jaw with a gentleness that had no right existing alongside all that violence. Kalin whispered. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Sarah insisted. Tears burned at the edges. His expression sealed shut again, stone and fury. He pulled free and stormed into the hallway. His presence flooded the corridor like a pressure wave. __quote _166 _. The Alpha Command shook the walls. Peter Marcus emerged from the security office, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Then he saw Kalin, standing there with blood already seeping through his shirt. Eyes blazing like furnace coals. Marcus straightened on instinct. Quote 167, quote 168, Kalin ordered, already moving toward the armory. Quote 169, quote. Marcus jogged to match his stride. Kalin stopped at the armory door, turned to face his beta. Marcus studied his alpha. He saw death living in Kaelin's eyes. He dipped his head low. "The right with you, Alpha, to the end." The assault on the Iron River estate was not a calculated military strike. It was a force of nature. Kaelin drove the lead vehicle, armored, reinforced, loaded with intent. He did not ease off as Silas's compound gates grew larger in the windshield. He buried the accelerator into the floor. The needle climbed, 80, 90, 100 miles per hour. Underscore, underscore, quote, underscore, 173, underscore, underscore. Marcus screamed from the passenger seat. Kaelin never blinked. The SUV slammed into the iron gates. The reinforced bumper, rigged with C4, detonated on contact. A fireball erupted skyward, vaporizing metal, hurling shrapnel across the Iron River guards like burning rain. Before the smoke thinned, Kaelin kicked his door wide and rolled free. He didn't shift, not yet. He fought as a man first, ripping an iron pipe from the wreckage and swinging it with devastating precision. Skulls split, ribs caved. He was a blur of calculated savagery. When resistance hardened around him, he surrendered to the wolf. Mid-stride, the transformation seized him, seamless, terrifying. A massive black beast emerged, fur dark as a void between stars. He was larger than any wolf should be. Rage and adrenaline from his brush with death fueled every muscle. He shredded through defensive lines, hurling grown men like they weighed nothing. Sarafina watched from a ridge high above the valley, Adrian beside her. She trembled, not from the cold, from what she saw below. An ocean of fire. Blackwood wolves flooded through the breach, but Kaelin was far ahead of them all. A singular engine of destruction, carving a direct path toward the main house. "He's going to kill every last one of them," Adrian breathed, horror threading his voice. "No," Sarafina said quietly. Her gaze stayed fixed on the black shape crashing through the mansion's front doors. Quote 176. Inside, Kaelin shifted back to his human form. Dignity meant nothing. Nudity meant nothing. He was drenched in blood and coated in ash. He stalked through the grand hallway as bullets screamed past him. One kissed his shoulder. Another punched into his thigh. His stride never faltered. He kicked through the heavy oak doors of the throne room. Silas Vane stood beside the fireplace, brandy glass in hand, his last 4 elite guards flanking him. The room reeked of fear. Silas shrieked, his voice splintering. Kaelin advanced. All 4 guards lunged at once. Kaelin didn't slow. He ducked a swing, gutted the first with extended claws, snapped the second's neck mid-motion, and launched the third through a glass display case. The 4th bolted. Kaelin stood before Silas now, chest heaving, blood dripping from his jaw. Silas choked out, stumbling backward until stone pressed against his spine. Seelen whispered. The sound was worse than any roar. His hand closed around Silas's throat. Silas clawed at Kaelin's forearm, twisted his face, tried to bite. But nothing could match the fury of a mate avenging what was his. Kaelin hoisted him off the ground and drove him backward into the roaring fireplace. The scream that left Silas was long, ragged. It sliced through the sounds of battle beyond the walls. Kaelin held him there, watched the flames devour him, watched the man who had threatened his world dissolve into ash and ember. When silence replaced the screaming, Kaelin released his grip. He turned his back on the fire, quote 183, quote. He told the servants huddled in the corner. They fled without a word. Kaelin walked out of the mansion as the structural beams surrendered overhead. The roof caved inward with a deafening crash, a column of sparks and smoke erupting thousands of feet into the dark sky. He stepped into the courtyard. Heat blistered his skin. Snow turned to steam beneath his feet. The battle was finished. Iron River wolves had surrendered or scattered into the night. Then the adrenaline drained from Carlin's body like blood from a wound. His legs buckled. He dropped to his knees in the mud, head bowed, chest splitting with every breath. "Carlin!" Her voice. He lifted his gaze through a haze of agony. Serafina was running down the hillside. She slipped on ice, hit the ground, scrambled upright, kept coming. She didn't care about the fire. She didn't care about the blood.
She tore across the scorched ground and dropped to her knees before him. "I did it!" Kalin choked out, his vision swimming as he fought to find her face. He pressed his skull against her chest, anchoring himself to the rhythm beneath her ribs. Nothing else made sense. "I burned it all. Sarah, every last inch. Is it enough? Did I pay the price?" Sarah's gaze swept the destruction. The wreckage of a dynasty. 100 years of Iron River dominance, ground to rubble because one man refused to release her. She looked down at Kalin. Bloody, shattered, devoted beyond reason. She pulled his head tight against her, silver dress soaking dark with his war. She breathed into his matted hair, tears cutting lines down her face. 2 weeks since the Iron River fires had finally consumed themselves, yet ash still haunted the air around the Cascade Peak estate. Snow fell heavy now, draping the charred ground and the shattered windows of the main house in clean, merciful white. But inside the Alpha's office, the atmosphere cracked like thin ice underfoot. Kalin Blackwood occupied the chair behind his massive mahogany desk, a figure of battered authority. He resembled neither the sleek tech mogul the human world recognized, nor the unstoppable predator his pack worshipped. He was a man rebuilding himself from fragments. His right arm hung trapped in a heavy black sling, pinned across his chest where the silver bullet had nearly stolen everything. Shadows pooled beneath his eyes stripped of their feral wildness, replaced by something haunted and bone-deep wary. Opposite him sat Elder Sterling, a senior representative of the Werewolf High Council. Sterling was a creature of ancient statutes and unyielding protocol, wrapped in a grey suit worth more than the entire East Wing renovation. One manicured finger tapped against a thick file on the desk. "You are not grasping the severity of your position, Alpha Blackwood," Sterling intoned, his voice dry as crumbling parchment. "The Council is in upheaval. You didn't simply defeat a rival. You erased a sovereign territory. You razed the Iron River estate to bare stone. You salted the ground beneath it. This isn't warfare. This is extinction." Kalin didn't flinch. His good hand reached for a glass of water, the motion rigid, laced with pain. He said, voice low, stripped of remorse. Sterling's palm cracked against the desk, the sound ricocheting off the walls. "An alpha who cannot leash his beast is a threat, not a leader. There are whispers, Kalin, dangerous ones. The Council is drafting a motion to strip your title. They believe you are volatile. They believe you are too fractured to govern." "Let them come," Kalin growled. Amber fire bleeding through his grey irises. "I invite any alpha on that council to walk through these doors and challenge me for this seat. One arm or not, I still have my teeth." "This isn't a question of brute force," Sterling hissed, leaning closer. "It is a question of judgment. You dismantled your entire alliance network for a woman who rejected you publicly. You are a king with no queen, waging war over a phantom. You are weak, Kalin, because you stand alone." The heavy oak doors didn't simply open. They swung wide with slow, deliberate force. __quote _199 ___. The voice landed cool, precise, a blade drawn clean through the tension.
Elder Sterling twisted in his chair. Kaelin's head jerked up. The aggression bled from his features, replaced by something closer to reverence. Sarafina filled the doorway. The jeans and paint-smeared T-shirts of the graphic designer, gone. The terrified girl who had vanished into the rain 5 years ago, erased. What stood in their place was a woman who looked capable of dismantling the entire council before her morning coffee. She wore a black power suit cut like a weapon, cinched at the waist, trousers breaking clean over stiletto heels that struck the hardwood like gunshots. Her hair pulled back, sharp, severe, modern. Her lips painted deep, violent red. She didn't walk, she prowled. She entered the room like she already owned every square inch of it, and the atmosphere bent around her. Sterling said, fingers fumbling at his tie, visibly rattled. Sarah replied, voice silk over steel. She swept past the row of empty chairs and settled on the edge of Kaelin's desk, legs crossed. Her gaze dropped to the elder, flat, unimpressed, glacial. As for rank, the woman who kept your alpha breathing outranks the bureaucrat who warmed the chair while we bled. Kaelin exhaled something close to a laugh. Would have been one if his ribs weren't wrapped in tape. __quote _204 __. Sarah shifted her attention to Kaelin. This close, the damage was impossible to miss. 2 weeks had hollowed him out, skin drained of color, a faint tremor in his hand whenever he released his grip on something solid. But his eyes were clear, sharp. Whatever darkness had been clawing at his mind, it was gone. Quote, 205, she asked. Sterling ceased to exist in her awareness. Kaelin understood the question without clarification. A solemn nod. Quote, 206. The DNA results had arrived from the lab that morning. Silence dropped over the room like a blade. Even Sterling leaned forward, ears practically twitching at the mention of the scandal that had torn through the region like wildfire. Sarah's voice held steady. Beneath her ribs, her heart slammed hard enough to crack bone. This was the final ghost, the last poisoned shadow of the lie that had dismantled them. Negative, Kaelin said, no hesitation. No softness. The child is not mine, never was. Genetic markers are a perfect match to Silas' vein. Sarah's eyes fell shut. One breath, long, shuddering, drawn from somewhere deep beneath her lungs. Months of pressure releasing in a single exhale. Validation poured through her like warm water, dissolving every stubborn residue of doubt. She wasn't the jealous ex. She wasn't delusional. She had been right all along. __quote _210 __, she asked, eyes opening. Kaelin's face turned to stone. I showed her the results personally. She confessed, all of it. Her plan was to stall the test until the baby arrived. By then, Silas would have seized control of the pack, and the child's bloodline wouldn't matter anymore. Where is she now? Sarah pressed. Exiled, Kaelin said. The word landed like a closed door. I didn't kill her, Sarafina. She carries a child. Even if that child was sired by a traitor, I won't stain my hands with innocent blood. But she's been stripped of the pack name. Transport departed for the Northern Territories an hour ago. She'll live in the Bleaklands, beyond the borders of any civilized pack. She will never set foot in Washington again. If she tries, the standing order is shoot on sight. For a woman who had worshipped status like a religion, banishment to that frozen, desolate wasteland, forgotten, utterly alone with nothing but her own guilt, was a punishment far crueler than death. Sarah gave one slow, deliberate nod. Good. Now listen here, Elder Sterling cut in, rising from his chair. While this personal saga is certainly moving, it does not address the critical question of the Alpha's standing. The Council demands a firm guarantee of stability. We need assurance this pack will not fracture. Kaelin pushed himself upright. A wince escaped through clenched teeth as his wounds screamed in protest, but he rose to his full height and held it.
He didn't look at Sterling. He turned his entire body toward Sarah. Kaelin said, voice thick with something raw. His hand dipped into his trouser pocket. It trembled, not from injury, from fear. He drew out the ring, 5 carats of blue diamond, the same ring Sarah had left on the dresser the night she walked away from him. Winter light caught the stone through the window and shattered into a constellation of tiny blazing reflections. Kaelin murmured, eyes locked on Sarah alone. One deliberate step forward, then another. His scent surrounded her, cedar and rain, warm and inescapable. 221, he whispered. I'd burn every kingdom standing if you asked it of me. But I'm done being the alpha of ashes and ruin. I want to build something real. I'm not fool enough to expect forgiveness today, Kaelin said, his voice fracturing on the last word. I broke us. I humiliated you in front of everyone. But I'm begging you, Serafina, let me repair what I destroyed. Be my partner, my equal, my Luna. I won't be wearing this, not yet, Sarah said, her voice steady as stone. Kaelin's shoulders sagged, the light in his expression guttering. Sarah? No. She stopped him with one raised hand. You don't erase 5 years of agony with one dramatic moment under Jewel. Kaelin, you dismantled an enemy pack. Impressive, truly. But can you sit through a dull Tuesday budget meeting? Can you actually listen when I tell you you're wrong? Can you trust me without demanding a blood test or starting a war to prove a point? She leaned closer, her face inches from his. I'm staying, _quote, _229, _. I'll help you rebuild the Cascade Pack. I'll manage the finances. I'll resurrect the brand from the ground up. I will be your partner in every way that matters. But this ring stays on the desk. How long? Cullen asked, his stare burning. 6 months, Sarah offered. A smirk played across her lips, playful and dangerous in equal measure. If you can survive 6 months without acting like a reckless, ego-drunk fool, if you can prove you value my mind as much as my safety, then I'll wear it. 6 months. I can do 6 months. I'll be a saint, boring as dirt. I'll take up embroidery if that's what it takes. I'd pay good money to see that. __quote _236 __. You witnessed his words, Elder? __quote _237 __. The Alpha isn't leaving. The pack stands secure, and we have a mountain of work waiting. So, unless you're volunteering to help us review contractor bids for the new East Wing, I suggest you clear out of my office. You heard her. And she terrifies me more than the entire council combined. I'd recommend you leave. Sterling snatched up his papers with an offended huff, muttering about unorthodox leadership, and swept from the room in a rustle of indignation. The moment the door closed, the air between them shifted. Formal became electric. Kaelin reached out with his good arm, hooking Sarah's waist and pulling her off the desk's edge, pressing her flush against him. Your office, he murmured, nose grazing hers. Funny. I could swear my name's on the deed. It's adorable that you think you're still in charge, Kaelin. I told you, I'm not just a designer anymore. I'm the one who decides whether the king keeps his throne. __quote _245 __. Long live the queen. Beyond the windows, snow fell in silence, burying everything that came before. Inside, the fire roared bright and fierce, casting gold across the road ahead. And that is exactly why you never underestimate a woman who knows what she's worth. Or the alpha who finally figures it out. Kaelin burned a kingdom to the ground to prove his love. But Serafina proved she never needed a crown to be royalty. So what did you think of this ending? Did Isella get off too lightly with exile?
Or was that the perfect punishment? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this brutal ride through heartbreak and vengeance kept you hooked, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and turn on notifications so the next story finds you. Until then, keep your standards high and your loyalty fierce.